Good morning and welcome to episode 63 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined by Hays Carlyon, as he will be joining me every Tuesday from here on out. Hays, thanks so much for agreeing to do that, and welcome back to the show.
Sure thing. Good morning, Gus. Great to be with you and certainly excited.
Yeah, today Hays and I are going to go over the top 5 winners of the Liam Coen hire, because yesterday we had a commenter asking about general manager candidates, because that's kind of the next phase in the offseason for the Jaguars, is to find their next general manager and to form that quote-unquote football leadership unit, along with President Mark Lamping, who just signed a contract extension this morning, actually, and then obviously Liam Coen and Tony Baselli, the new EVP of football ops. And so we already did that, actually, is what I was going to say. Instead of diving in today further, me and I already kind of covered the list of general manager candidates and even more candidates that aren't on the official list. And so that's episode 61 from last Thursday. You can check that out if you're interested in general manager content. But again, Hays and I are going to go over our top 5 winners of the Liam Coen hire, because I know that we've talked a lot about Liam Coen on this show and at 1010XL at large, but I feel like the majority of the conversation has been about Liam Coen as a coaching candidate. And obviously the conversation was geared towards Jacksonville, but now we can officially move on and say, what is Liam Coen, the Jaguars head coach, going to be like? So we can kind of shift our focus for how he's going to benefit the players already on the Jaguars roster. And so, Hays, why don't you start us off? Who's the number one player or person that's going to benefit and win the most from Liam Coen being hired as Jaguars head coach?
Well, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you with number
Okay.
one, because to me, the big winner are the Jaguar fans. Because Liam Coen whacked Trent Baalke. Seriously. He saved the Jaguars from who knows how many more years of future incompetence. And, so I think if it had been Liam Coen with Trent Baalke, I don't think there would have been a lot of excitement. But with Liam Coen, who I don't think had a lot of leverage, with him being able to convince Shad Khan that, no, we need to be in alignment, I need my own guy. I don't think he was like, I can't work with this guy, but I think in a very delicate, well-orchestrated way, Liam Coen got Trent Baalke removed. And, I think right there that's a huge win for the Jaguar fans. And it's brought in excitement and enthusiasm back to the fan base. It's been really good to see after what was not only a dreadful season, but a dreadful first 10 days of the offseason when Shad Khan was obviously so closely aligned to Trent Baalke. So I'm going to start with that. Number one for me with the Liam Coen hire, the Jaguar fans are the big winners, because Liam Coen is getting a totally fresh leadership group brought in here to lead this organization.
I love it. Yeah, I think if Trent Baalke had been retained, then I don't think a lot of fans would have been given Shad Khan the benefit of the doubt in terms of choosing a new head coach. I think even if it was Ben Johnson, if somehow Ben Johnson came and Trent Baalke stayed, I think even like Ben Johnson coming wouldn't be enough to excite Jaguars fans if Baalke did stay. And so I think that's a great one. I was trying to think of like a non-player to include on my list, but I'm glad you got that covered for us. Jaguars fans, the number one winner. I think that's a good one. My number one was what I assume your number one player is going to be, but you can correct me later if I'm wrong. But quarterback Trevor Lawrence. I think it's pretty obvious. After Baker Mayfield set not just career best marks in terms of his own career, but also set franchise records last year in his first year working with Liam Coen. And that's significant because the franchise records that he broke were originally set by Tom Brady. And so Baker had a great year last year. I've talked before on this show about one of the things that I liked from Liam's system is sending 5 receivers out a lot of the time so that Trevor has a lot of different options to go with the football rather than having 2 options. And if they're dead, then the play is essentially dead. But again, that's certainly just one example. But I think that the reason that this entire conversation is exciting is because I think that Liam Coen is definitely one of those coaches that doesn't have a scheme that he fits his players into. His scheme is versatile based on his players. And I think you saw that a lot last year in terms of the weapons that Tampa Bay used, especially because they had a bunch of various injuries. And so they were kind of forced to, but also able to put different guys into different roles because of that. But I don't know. I think that above all else, above the weapons, Liam Coen really geared his offense towards Baker Mayfield, and they did a lot of shotgun because Baker's a shorter quarterback, so he's usually more comfortable kind of being able to see the defense out of shotgun as opposed to lining up under center. But when they did line up under center, there was a lot of boot rollouts because Baker is good at that because he's a pretty solid NFL athlete, especially for a quarterback. And he can definitely scramble and pick up yards that way. And so I think that Liam built a system that kind of maximized all of his players' strengths, but I think it definitely started with the quarterback, and I expect it to start with the quarterback here in Jacksonville as well. So I think Trevor Lawrence, Jaguars fans, yeah, I think that's a good one, but I think Trevor Lawrence is pretty easily number one player. Would you agree with that, Hays? Is he your number two?
Yeah, I mean, he'd have to be because, I mean, you look at the other thing is the hand that Trevor Lawrence has been dealt in his NFL career. It hasn't been a great one. You know, obviously we know about Urban Meyer, that nightmare in his rookie year. But even I was really surprised at the decisions Doug Peterson made once he was entrenched here. And once it looked like it was really working, it was like, you know, they had this nice first year where it looked like, you know, Trevor had found the perfect partner in Doug Peterson, who played in the NFL and had been a successful offensive coordinator, had been a Super Bowl winning head coach. And it was like, this is going to be the person to really grow with Trevor. And it was like they got off to a good start. And then Doug Peterson basically gave up the reins of what made him such a good head coach and delegated way too much to Press Taylor. And, you know, I mean, it's one of those things that I think now when you look at it, not to totally rehash everything, but now when you look at it, Liam Coen is got a ton of ambition. He's not resting on laurels. I mean, he is here to prove to the world that he can be one of the greatest NFL head coaches while calling plays that the league has seen in a while. And so, I mean, I think that really fits Trevor well. I mean, he's got a young, ambitious coach who obviously is on the cutting edge of modern football. And I think that's really going to help Trevor. And I don't think you're going to see in 2 or 3 years Liam Coen saying, you know, now I want to manage the game more and I don't want to call plays, because I don't think that's, I mean, just early impression. I don't get a sense that's how Liam Coen is wired. I think he's always going to be his own play caller. And so that's really exciting because now you do feel like Trevor Lawrence, if Liam Coen is good, you feel like Trevor now has the partner, because that's really what it is. It's coach player, but if it's going to work at the highest level, it's got to be a partnership with the head coach and the franchise quarterback. And I do think from a personality standpoint, Liam Coen has the grit, the attention to physicality that is only going to help Trevor Lawrence, you know, giving him the best protection, the best ground game to support him. But really just like, hopefully this is the last offense that Trevor Lawrence has to learn for like 7 years, you know, at a minimum. And if that's the case, then this will be a really good run here for the Jaguars compared to what we're used to seeing. But it's got to be Trevor Lawrence just because of what you said, the success that Baker Mayfield has had, and now hopefully providing some stability for Trevor as he hits what, you know, really should be the peak of his career.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point too, because it's definitely like the biggest partnership is between the head coach and the quarterback, but it's also about multiple partnerships between the quarterback and his offensive coordinator and the quarterback and his quarterback's coach and the quarterback and a lot of different people. And so I think that like one of the biggest takeaways that I had from the full coaching staff that was finalized late last week was that I think that the biggest strength of the coaching staff is probably quarterback development, because Liam Coen, pretty obvious. We've talked about him a lot. And then Grant Udinski. Me and I also talked to him about him on last Thursday's episode 61, if you want to know more about him. But he did great work with the quarterbacks in Minnesota, especially not in 2024, but 2023 when Kirk Cousins was injured. And then they brought in like 3 different backups throughout the season. So he's done great work with quarterbacks. And then Spencer Whipple from Arizona, I believe he's going to be the quarterbacks coach. And he's held in really high regard, a son of longtime NFL assistant Mark Whipple. And so I think that there's a really great infrastructure in place there for Trevor to develop, not just because Liam Coen is the head honcho, the head boss now, but because of all the guys that he hired too. And so I'm also excited to see like what the system ends up being for Trevor Lawrence, because I think I'm certainly not the only one alone in saying this, but I think Trevor hypothetically could play in pretty much any NFL offense, I guess, except for like the type of run-heavy NFL offenses that incorporate a lot of quarterback runs. But he can still like do a couple of zone reads and stuff a game. You just don't want to make the house out of it. And so I'm interested to see like what direction Coen takes it, because if Lawrence truly can hypothetically run any kind of offense, then what is Coen going to choose to prioritize, or how is he going to choose his identity based on Lawrence's strengths in terms of play action rate, like the usage of shotgun versus under center, how far they're throwing downfield, how many screens they're doing. It'll be really interesting to see how he molds the scheme around Trevor Lawrence. So you've got two people on your list. I've got just Trevor Lawrence as my number one. My number two is Brian Thomas Jr., who Liam Coen said a couple weeks ago that he would be able to sleep well at night if he knew that you got Brian Thomas Jr. 10 targets per game. So that's definitely music to everyone's ears in Jacksonville. And I think that what Liam Coen did last year in terms of, I think how he used Mike Evans is probably the best example of how he could use Brian Thomas, because Mike Evans is a guy, he's like a walking first ballot Hall of Famer. He just had like his 12th 1,000-yard receiving season in a row. But he's always been known as like just a vertical threat, but really his game is so much more well-rounded than that. I think Mike Evans might be the most underrated route runner in the league, to be honest. And Liam Coen recognized that. And so rather than having Mike Evans be a decoy and like just running vertically for a lot of routes, he really expanded Mike Evans's route tree to have a lot more intermediate in-breakers and out-breakers. And so by making his route tree kind of more well-rounded, he made Mike Evans just more well-rounded threat to attack every level of the field. So that makes it really hard to defend him in the Buccaneers offense. And so I think it's kind of going to be a similar story with Brian Thomas Jr. Everyone, or at least all the like kind of casual NFL fans and followers, assumed that Brian Thomas Jr. was just going to be another vertical deep threat. But obviously, as he showed last season, on his way to breaking every single Jacksonville rookie receiving record, he's a lot more than just a deep threat. And so I think Liam Coen will recognize that and be able to weaponize him on screens, weaponize him on intermediate in-breakers and out-breakers, weaponize him all over the field, which I think is going to be really encouraging, because really before like Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis got hurt last year, Brian Thomas's role was a little bit pigeonholed, and it wasn't until injuries that Doug Peterson and Press Taylor really opened up the offense and made the ball go through Brian Thomas Jr. And so I think that right away, Liam Coen is going to have a lot of different ways to get the ball to Brian Thomas Jr. And for that, I'm really excited.
Yeah, I think it's a great call. And, again, Liam Coen talked about at his introductory press conference and various interviews that day beyond that he conducted. He was really surprised at Brian Thomas Jr.'s skill set. He was like, we weren't looking for a receiver in the first round last year in Tampa. So, I looked at him a little bit, but I didn't really dive in and do a deep evaluation on him coming out of LSU. And he pointed out, some of the things that the Jaguars did with him last year in the slot is really encouraging in terms of he has a skill set there that I didn't believe that really. And Liam say is like, it really was more that we just didn't evaluate it as thoroughly as we probably would have. But there is a lot of things that he can offer a play caller and an offensive designer. And without it, I think Brian Thomas Jr. would have been a big winner, whether it was Aaron Glenn or if it was Mike Vrabel, even if it was a defensive guy, because he's just shown, at least from what we've been able to see in 1 year, that I think he's pretty much scheme proof. I mean, I think you could have a moron offensive coordinator and, he's probably going to be productive. You could have, we found out you can have a backup quarterback. He's going to be really productive. You can have no other real receiver threat out there except for him, with the defense totally focusing in on him, and he can still be productive. So he just looks like, again, it's 1 year, and we'll see. The league will counterpunch him. He'll get studied extensively throughout this offseason, particularly by, obviously the division and the teams, particularly once the schedule comes out, those first four teams that the Jaguars are going to see. They'll do a lot of work on Brian Thomas this offseason. Maybe something changes. But I'd be surprised based on what we saw from an incredibly impressive rookie season. So now Brian Thomas Jr. not only has, what looks to be a really good offensive mind, but potentially an exquisite offensive system in mind. And so, yeah, how could it not really benefit him? I'll tell you another guy that I think this really benefits. The next guy on my list, and this is more off the field, I'd say, than on it. But the arrival of Liam Coen and him having so much power and really needing to connect with Trevor Lawrence, going as far as to say that, Trevor Lawrence is going to have input on how this roster is put together, and look, I love Trevor Lawrence, but I don't know that he's really earned that. I mean, I don't think that his play has been so strong that it's like he has gotten to that level of franchise quarterback where it's like, okay, he is now going to have some real, say in what we're doing. But you can't say that if you're Liam Coen publicly and then not take his opinion seriously. And what this gets me to is Christian Kirk is a massive winner in the Liam Coen hiring, because I'm not sure if it was a defensive mind or a more experienced head coach, somebody like that. I don't know that Christian Kirk, with his current contract, would be safe. But I think he is safe because I just don't think we know how Trevor Lawrence feels about Christian Kirk. He loves him as a player, and they're very close friends.
Yeah.
I don't think Liam Coen, with the world knowing how much power he has here, I don't think they're going to cut Christian Kirk, even though you could make an argument that it'd be good football business sense to do that. But they don't have to do it. And I don't think they will, because I think, again, Liam Coen is trying to establish that trust with Trevor Lawrence. And if he cuts Christian Kirk, I think that damages that relationship early on. I mean, Trevor would understand, but I do think there would be a sense of betrayal, particularly if you're going to tell the world at your introductory press conference that I have a say in this. And so I think Christian Kirk, huge winner. And I do think Liam Coen will look at Christian Kirk and see that there's a really good player here. I mean, why would I want to release him? The offensive mind is going to want Brian Thomas Jr. and Christian Kirk. And I think to a lower level, Evan Ingram, whose cap number isn't, it's not the albatross is too strong, but it's not the size of what Christian Kirk's is.
Yeah.
So I think Christian Kirk a big winner because I think he was sort of tenuous on whether he would be here or not. And now I think there's a much greater chance that he is, which I think is a good decision.
Yeah, I'm right there aligned with you. Christian Kirk was the number 3 guy on my list after Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. for pretty much the same reason. To start with your first point, I think that Trevor Lawrence has earned the right to have a say in team and like what the team is doing, just because of the team has already invested in him so much that like they might as well go all in and build around him and his vision. And so I hear your point about like he hasn't really shown enough on the field. But I think, again, if you're already going to give him the huge franchise quarterback contract, might as well go all in with that player while he's here. And so I think in the same boat as you, where I was iffy on the Kirk contract, where from a business perspective, it probably made sense to let him go, especially considering that you have not as good, but a similar player kind of in the wings in Parker Washington, who's going to be entering his 3rd year and was arguably like the most improved player on Jacksonville last year. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And so, but now that Liam Coen has been hired and Christian Kirk was at the introductory press conference, and Spencer Whipple is the quarterback's coach who used to coach Christian Kirk in the wide receiver position in Arizona for about 6 years. He got retained through 2 different staffs, or on the Kingsbury staff and then on the Gannon staff. And so it's like a buddy-buddy situation. Now there's a lot of buddies, not just so I think that off the field, Kirk is definitely a winner. because his job was not necessarily saved, but I think secured by the Liam Coen hire. And then on the field, I think that he's certainly a winner too, because obviously the offense is going to be running through Trevor Lawrence / Brian Thomas. But that's going to benefit Christian Kirk because I think he's always been certainly an above average starting caliber NFL wide receiver, but would be better as a secondary option to play off of a primary option as opposed to being the guy. And so I think it's really impressive what he's done in Jacksonville, especially in 2022, when he has been the guy, because it's not like Calvin Ridley really showed that he was a step above him. And then Brian Thomas didn't really get a step above him last year until Kirk went out from injury. But I think that, yeah, with so much focus going to be pointed towards Brian Thomas from opposing defenses, that's going to open up a lot of space for Christian Kirk to do his thing. And he's definitely got the best, not just off field, but on field rapport with Trevor Lawrence too. They definitely have great chemistry on the field. And so, yeah, Christian Kirk is my third guy. Who is your fourth winner on your list, Hays?
Well, I mean, I think we got to go with the running backs. I mean, Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, however that ends up shaking out in terms of workload. But I mean, they have to be dazzled with what they see out of what Liam Coen was able to do with the Tampa Bay running attack last year. And the other thing, too, is it's pretty clear there's some big people coming this offseason. I mean, whether it's free agency, whether it's the draft, that offensive line is, I think, if it's not priority one, it's priority 1A. I mean, and that's from, hearing Executive Vice President of Football Ops Tony Baselli talk. We've heard Liam Coen talk about, when we break the huddle, the first thing the opponent sees is our offensive line, and that's got to mean something, and it will mean something. So I think if you're Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, you're incredibly excited to see, okay, what kind of personnel upgrades are we hopefully getting up front to create more space for us? But also from a design standpoint, we're probably now going to have more opportunities to really break things, because it just never felt like Press Taylor had any real command of the ground game. And again, this is where it's a shame Doug Peterson didn't, really kind of realize maybe he's not ready for this. Let me take the reins back a little bit here, because the ground game just always seemed stagnant. There wasn't a lot of creativity to it. I mean, I do think that they got pushed around a lot too, because I think they built a really finesse offensive line. But but I think Liam Coen and the new leadership here is going to really boost the ground game, both schematically, and I think they are going to really go address that offensive line, and they're going to look at physicality, not so much. I mean, they've got guards on this team. They've got smaller calves than receivers. I mean, it's unbelievable. Some of these guys, the build. I'm talking starting linemen,
right?
And so, to me, I think you're going to see. There's no way it could get less physical. So I think particularly in that interior, you're going to see some maulers. I think you're going to see guys that, to Liam's point, play to the echo of the whistle, which it's been a while since the Jaguars have had an offensive lineman that had that kind of an edge. And that's all going to benefit the backs. So, I think Liam Coen will make it a priority to use him a little bit more in the passing game than they were here. So, particularly Etienne. So, right. I think in looking at it, if you're Tank Bigsby, if you're Travis Etienne, I think you've got to be really excited about what you can do in this offense based on what Bucky Irving and company were able to do last year in Tampa.
Yeah, I totally hear your point about the offensive line being a big part. And I know that definitely like the analytics nerds around the NFL will tell you that like the running game is much more about the offensive line than it is the running back. But I mean, as we've seen throughout the NFL this season between Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon going to the Texans, Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, the list goes on. Even Austin Eckler had a pretty efficient season in Washington. Running backs definitely do matter. And I think that the biggest reason that Jacksonville's run game just like wasn't very successful and was stagnant, as you said, Hayes, was that it just wasn't layered very well between plays, especially like mirroring the running game and the passing game, where it's not like they had a ton of run plays that kind of had a mirrored pass play, but then also just in terms of sequencing plays and like trying to run certain plays to set up another play, it felt like they just had a bunch of designer plays that they just kind of threw at the wall rather than actually having a plan for how they're going to deploy them. And so I think that they could have used some more motion, so like some more creativity, but they did use like a decent amount of pullers and getting offensive linemen out in space. And so I don't think it was the most uncreative run game in the NFL. But again, I think that the sequencing was the worst part of it. And I think that the Liam Coen hire is really encouraging for that, because I think that part of the reason that he's been kind of compared to Sean McVay as a coaching candidate is not just because, I mean, obviously he's in the Sean McVay coaching tree, but it's not just that, or that he's generally a great offensive mind. Like what makes him a great offensive mind, and same goes for Sean McVay and same goes for Kyle Shanahan, is that they're able to layer the plays one after another to make defenses not know what's coming, because certain plays and formations and personnel can like all look the same, but have a bunch of different options for like what the play actually is going to be. And so that kind of helps to freeze defenders and to make the offense more efficient and more explosive. And so I definitely agree with you that both running backs are winners from the Liam Coen hire, but technically on my list, I just wrote down Travis Etienne because, again, I do think Tank Bigsby is a winner, but I think that Travis Etienne is a bigger winner because I think even like the Jags did do some good stuff, especially in 2022, which was Etienne's best season when he kind of broke out and took the starting role from James Robinson, who did get hurt that year. But the Jags did a great job of kind of making crack toss one of their primary run plays. But again, they just like the way that they incorporated it, sometimes it worked if they were just able to catch the defense in a favorable look, but sometimes it didn't. And so they at least like tried to get Etienne into space. And I'm excited to see the ways that Liam Coen tries to get Travis Etienne into space because, I mean, he's the all-time leading rusher in ACC history. Like, I think he might be the most underrated player in terms of just raw football talent on the Jaguars roster. And so I think it's just kind of he's in like a similar story as Trevor, where I feel like it's kind of a matter of time before he breaks out truly because he's just too talented not to. And I think that now he finally is going to be working with the perfect head coach. And I think that I'm really excited again to see like specifically how Liam Coen utilizes him, because I think that people like a lot of people might assume that would be best in a zone run game where he's kind of reading the blocks in front of him and kind of can make one cut against traffic and go. But I actually think that Travis Etienne is almost like a similar runner to Derrick Henry. Obviously, he's not nearly as big or powerful, but similar in that like he's most dangerous when he's going from north to south. Like Etienne is shifty, but he's not like as shifty as you might assume, being able to shake defenders in a phone booth or get like wiggle out of close contact defenders. But like when he's going north to south and he's able to build up a little bit of steam, then that's when like his contact balance really starts showing off and defenders start just bouncing off of him. And so I think that more gap-oriented schemes where he can kind of like find a hole and then just shoot up it, where again, just like being able to get Travis Etienne going north to south, I'm really excited to see how Liam Coen is able to do that. So do you have two more guys, Hayes, on your list?
I think I've only got one more.
I think we've both got
Jags fans, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, running backs. So I'll close my list with Heath Farwell, the special teams coordinator, who Liam Coen elected to retain, which I think is a really smart move. Yeah. But if you're Heath Farwell, you had to be a little nervous. There's only 32 of these jobs. And if the new Jaguars head coach had not retained him, then who knows if Heath Farwell, I mean, I'm sure he would have gotten an NFL job because he's done a really nice job. But, there's a difference between being an assistant special teams coach and the special teams coordinator. And obviously he didn't have to uproot his family or anything like that. He gets to work with the specialists that he's gotten to know here that have performed at such a high level. So I'll go with Heath Farwell. And again, I commend Liam Coen. A lot of particularly young coaches, they tend to step into a new job and just be like, nope, it's all bad. It's all got to go. I can't have anybody here that's been here longer than me. You know, I don't want anybody knowing about things that I'm unaware of. And so it's got to be, you know, clean slate across the board. I want my own staff and nobody that had any ties here. I commend Liam Coen for having enough self-confidence to be like, well, hang on, special teams here is pretty good. And I really think Heath Farwell is a good coach. So, you know, I think it made sense, you know, for both sides. But Heath Farwell definitely a winner because he gets to maintain a coordinator title that probably looked in jeopardy when he found out Doug Peterson was getting canned.
Yeah, I think Liam Coen has shown some great self-evaluation skills, I guess, because I think he was kind of brutally honest during his introductory press conference tour about how there's a lot of things not right in the organization that need to change for the better. And so it's definitely good to recognize that. But it's also definitely good to recognize where things are actually good. And special teams is arguably the brightest spot of the season. Probably the second brightest spot of the season last year behind Brian Thomas Jr. Cam Little set various franchise rookie records for kicker. Logan Cook and Ross Matisic both made it to the Pro Bowl. And I think while they were there at the Pro Bowl, they were interviewed and said that they were thrilled that Heath was retained and that that's their guy. And so definitely a huge win for Heath. Big win also, I think, for Cam Little and Ross Matisic and Logan Cook. And then also just in a similar vein, I would say tight ends coach Richard Angula. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the tight ends coach was also retained. So I think you can mark him as a winner as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like that one. My final one is Evan Engram, the tight end, because I think that he's one that I'm still a little bit iffy about, of whether, because from a business standpoint, maybe it makes more sense to let him go. But I think that even if he's not as close off the field and as good golfing partners with Trevor Lawrence, Evan Engram is definitely a great locker room guy, a great teammate. I think everyone was able to recognize that this year when Trevor Lawrence got that nasty hit from the Texans defender, and Evan Engram was the first one there to defend him. And then Engram, I think that, so assuming that he is going to be retained or not cut by the team and will be here next season, I think that he's another guy that, I mean, the theme of my list is kind of just talented players who I think could be their talents would be most maximized by Liam Coen. And I think that Evan Engram definitely falls under that umbrella because he's talked, especially last offseason going into the year, about how he was used so horizontally and so much as a check down option. And he said, certainly I'm a team player. I'm going to do anything that the team asks me. And I don't doubt that at all. But he did say that he would like to be used more vertically and downfield. And I don't think it's just oh, I want better stats. I think it's that he knows that he's not being fully or wasn't fully maximized, and that his talents could have been further maximized to help out the offense. And we did see that he was actually pretty good as a downfield player. He wasn't really used down the seam much at all during the Doug Peterson era, but there was a few times that he would line up outside wide, and he mossed a Colts defender. Was it week 1 of last year? And then he mossed a Titans defender in 2023, I believe. And so, yeah, I think Evan Engram has shown that he can be more than just a check down option, because he has shown that he maybe he is their quote unquote receiver type tight end and a tight end cosplaying as a slot receiver and so on. But he's the type of receiver that's really good. And so I'm excited to see, again, what exactly Liam Coen does to maximize the various individual players on Jacksonville's offense in order to make kind of the whole thing go kaboom. So to recap, my list was, in terms of winners of the Liam Coen hire, number 1, Trevor Lawrence, number 2, Brian Thomas Jr., number 3, Christian Kirk, number 4, Travis Etienne, and number 5, Evan Engram. Hays, you want to recap your list?
Sure. Number 1, Jaguar fans. Number 2, Trevor Lawrence. Number 3, Christian Kirk. Number 4, Etienne and Bigsby. And number 5, Heath Farwell.
Floyd Brooks had a good one in YouTube comments. She said Green Bay defenders. I'm assuming that she means just because the Jaguars hired 2 assistant defensive coaches from Green Bay onto the Jaguars' defensive coaching staff. Maybe look out for some Packers defensive free agents. That's a good nod. Hays, before we get out of here, do you have any honorable mentions, any losers, or anything else you want to get off your chest before we go?
There are no losers in this Jaguars offseason. Not yet.
My honorable mention was Luke Fortner, just because I think it makes sense for the Jaguars to draft an heir to Mitch Morse, someone to eventually take over as a long-term center after Morse. I assume he's going to retire here in the next year or two. But Luke Fortner is still sticking around, and he has experience with Liam Coen back in Kentucky, and so that's kind of a low-key one to keep in mind for the future, not necessarily as a week one immediate winner. But Hays, I think that'll do it for us today. Thanks so much for joining. Looking forward to having you back next Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gus. Take care.
All right. Everyone have a great day. I'll see you guys back here tomorrow, 9:04 a.m. Be joined by John Ledyard of Audibles and Analytics. He covers the Bucs and the Steelers and the NFL at large. But we're going to dive more into Liam Coen so that he can tell us a little bit more about why he's so good at calling plays. Floyd. Floyd said, oh, right. Oh, good call out, Floyd. Floyd was referring to Evan mossing 3 Green Bay defenders last year. Yeah, that was a great highlight. But also look out for Green Bay defenders in free agency. That too. All right, everyone. 9:04 tomorrow. See you then.